G'day, Anthony Ross here, and welcome to this week's Mental Toughness Made Simple video, where my goal is to help coaches, parents and players develop mental toughness more effectively. And during these videos, and if you've been following my advice over time, you would have heard me talk a lot about committed actions or committing to helpful processes that increase the chance of success. So one question I get quite commonly is the question of what are these committed actions, what are the processes that we should be advising our players or our children to do. And so today I'll just talk about the four main categories. When I'm thinking about these processes, these are the four categories that I generally use. We use at Mentally Tough Tennis, and it's a good way for players to get the hang of the different styles of commitments that they could be committing to. And so the first one is what I call the external category. So the external category is when we are committing to something outside our body. It could be things like a target, so a target on serve, or even during a rally, practicing committing to a certain target. Could be something about our opponent. So for example, making our opponent move. It could be watching the ball, like as a really simple example of something that players could commit to externally. So that's category one. The second category we call body racket. And so this is committing to anything to do with our body and racket. It's really relevant, particularly for practicing improving skills. So in practice sessions, if you're working with a player, then often you will be asking them to commit to a technical cue, for example, that will hopefully help them improve their shots, or something to do with their body. It could be like having great energy, great footwork and so forth. And so this, as I said, this is a body racket one. In matches, quite often we'll end up advising players to commit to a body racket cue on serve or return. Sometimes that can be helpful. I know Bianca Andreescu has talked about that on return, having a certain technical cue that she uses when she's returning. So the third one is what we call game style, and this is pretty self-explanatory. Probably the most common one that players we work with end up choosing to commit to during matches as their core commitment. And so we could categorize this as super aggressive. The most common one that players tend to commit to, that we work to in matches, is like what we call smart or balanced aggression, which the aim is to try to rally for control of the points, to force errors, and then to earn the right to attack as their basic game style. And the other one we are now calling lockdown, since hearing Jim Courier describe Novak Djokovic's game style that he tries to go to in big moments during matches, where he's basically trying to lock down, be as consistent as possible, and make his opponents feel like they've got to go for more than they're comfortable with. So that's game style. And the fourth one's a bit different. It's called alert autopilot. And this is where we're not specifically like getting keywords that we're trying to commit to something external, body racket or game style. Alert autopilot, it's probably more relevant for advanced players who have done already a lot of technical work, so they're comfortable with their technique, their game style, and their patterns have become really well trained. And so alert autopilot is simply where we get to the start of the point, and our commitment is to be present in that moment and very alert to our environment, especially the ball, where we're allowing our previous training and previous tennis experience to come out during the point, purely based on being alert and in that present place, versus being caught up in thoughts and judgments and so forth. So these are the four basic categories that we work with. It is a good idea, I think, to, especially when you're working with younger players, to give them experience of all the different categories, and it can be a really helpful thing we've found to categorize them in this way, and so kids can start to get the hang of them as well. But in the end, even professional players in college that we work with often will end up still using these categories as guides for what they're trying to commit to. And ultimately, the question that we're asking at the end of each point in matches is then, did I commit to this helpful process, as the important reflection, more so than how am I executing and am I winning or losing and so forth. So I hope you find this helpful. I may be able to try to put up a form. I'll see how I go, that you can link to give you a reminder of these categories as well. All right, talk to you next week.